Hello, my beautiful craftmates. I am Sunshine, your Days of Future craft teacher, and today I am making this pink self-love candle. I'm making this candle out of some wax melts that I got from the store. They come in a clamshell package and they're just in cubes, and some other things that I have from around my house or I got from the dollar store. This video is a little bit longer. There's a lot of information in this video, specifically since this is a candle, and this is the first craft that we are making that isn't a holder. This actually has a specific magical purpose. So I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently, and I will be talking about the intent that I have behind this. So without further ado, let's get started. You cannot have a candle without the wax. Now that's self-explanatory. But for magical candles specifically, in my opinion, there are two components to this. First is the colors, and second is the scents. Color magic is fairly easy to understand. It's very linked to human psychology. So you can color your candles any color you want to link your intent to the magic that you're doing. A good example for coloring could be using crayons when you melt the wax to get that pigmentation. You can use food coloring. If it's edible, you can pretty much put it in a candle as long as it won't go bad, right? You can use previous candles that you've used and melt in the wax as well as like the wax cubes, which I will be using. Well, I'll be using a lot of different things, but mainly in this project, I'm using the scented wax cubes that I got from a store. The other really important thing for candle making is the fragrance or the scent that you're using. Now, again, you can use a unscented white candle for any purpose. You don't have to have a very specific color-coded fragranced candle for a very specific purpose. If you have a lot of leftover white wax, and you can absolutely melt that down and use that as a multi-purpose candle. The fragrances are linked to your intent and what you want. So you can use herbology here, you can use just different fragrances that you enjoy smelling, that help you focus. It just really depends on what you enjoy and what you want out of the candle that you're making. So you can see here, I'm just kind of putting everything aside, and I'm going to show you how I save my wax and what I use. Now, because this is a self-love candle specifically for me, I'm scenting my candle with this Better Homes and Gardens Watermelon Buttercream, and I had a previous clamshell that broke, that's why I have the cubes in the jar. And I'm using this red candle. I know it looks orange here, but I promise it's red. And I'm going to show you how I save the wax that's been melted from previous candles. This was used for a friend of mine to help her get over some heartbreak she was feeling, and because it was used for like a loving purpose, I feel okay using the leftover wax for this specific project. So you can see here, the wax is hardened, and I use a spoon to just pop it up and put it in the jar with the other wax. That's it. That's how I save all of my wax. I just kind of color coordinate it and I put it aside. And when I have enough wax to make a candle, that's just what I do. And I put it together. I save the little wick clip. That's what that's called. Put the bowl away to get washed. Recycle the wick clip. And I have all of my wax that I need for this project. So again, you can see I just save it all. I'm going to pull out my clamshell here. But yeah, that's pretty much how much you will need. This is just a dollar store vase. It's actually not a jar. And I'm just going to set my wax aside and we will talk about the jar that I'll be using. The biggest thing to understand when you are making candles is that glass can only be heated up so many times before it shatters. So those really cool tall 7-day candles you can get for $1, do not put another candle in them. The glass is cheap and it will shatter. I've had candles shatter straight from the store. Don't even do it. If you have other glass containers that you know the glass has been tempered specifically so that it can handle being heated up, then you can use that. But I wouldn't reuse a glass container that already had a candle in it. A lot of times, candle makers will use the cheapest glass they can and just pray to the gods that it won't shatter in shipping or when it gets heated up or anything like that. You need to be very, very careful. I prefer mason jars because they can handle getting heated up, specifically because they need to handle boiling water, hot water. They need to handle being in a pressurized chamber. So I prefer the mason jars or canning jars or anything that I know has been tempered. So you can see here I have a small mason jar. It's actually called a quilted jelly jar. And I know this has been tempered. I know this can be canned with. And because it can be canned, I can use it for candle making. Now I have here a gray candle that I've made in a previous attempt to make a candle, and you can see that there's like an inner ring and an outer ring and a ring in between the two. Now what ended up happening is the outer ring isn't melting, the inner ring is, and the ring in between is kind of, but what ends up happening is that as the wax expands and melts, it extinguishes the flame. So you can see here I have this smaller jar just to make sure that the wick and the wax is burning at an even rate. So you can see here, this is my black candle that I use for meditation. And it's about the same size, but it's a little bit thinner, slimmer. So the wax is still melting at an even rate and burning with the wick, making it a more efficient candle in general. Now you can definitely see that there's definitely a difference between how the two candles have burned. And the reason why I'm choosing a smaller jar just for my demonstration today. And I love this quilted texture versus the smooth texture on this black jar, just because the quilted texture of the quilted jar just makes the light sparkle a little bit as it's coming out. So that's why I'm choosing this small jar. I apologize just for the sheer length of this video, but there's still some more information that we need to cover. So let's go over the other materials needed before we actually start making this candle. I have here a high temperature, really nice hot glue gun I've had for years. Has never let me down. Be really careful when handling a hot glue gun. You don't want to burn yourself. I also have, and again, you can use edible things in your candle. So I have some sprinkles and this edible glitter spray, which will kind of make sense, as well as a very large popsicle stick and a pair of pliers. I'm going to use the pliers to break the popsicle stick so it stands up inside the glass, so that as the wick burns down, the popsicle stick doesn't end up tilting and burning itself out. So you can see here on my gray candle that you kind of create a base with the wood so that the wick can stand up as it burns down and as the wax melts. I also have this OXO silicone pouring spout. I use it specifically for wax making. I don't use it for food. I like that it moves its pores. I also have my spray bottle of New Moon water and some pink strawberry incense just to match the aesthetic of my project. We are finally, praise the gods, moving on to actually making this candle. So let's get started. I'm just going to take a lighter and light my black candle. I have very specific purpose of why I light this candle specifically for any spell work or magic work or anything like that. I won't really go into that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to light the incense and essentially smoke cleanse everything that I'm going to be using. All of the tools, all of the materials, the wax, everything, just to make sure that everything is spiritually clean. And the reason I'm doing this is because I use different tools for different projects, and I don't want my energies to kind of intermingle, especially since I want my intent to be self-love. I need everything to be emanating self-love. So you don't have to use any like a special incense that you only use for a specific purpose. I love incense. I love fragrances. So I have a ton of incense, and I have a ton of different candle fragrances and things like that, and wax melts and everything. So you just kind of, you use what you have on hand, use what you want, follow your intuition for that, and you just smoke cleanse everything that you're going to be using for this project. Once you're done cleansing your space however you want, and you feel comfortable with the space, you're focusing on the intent that you're making or using, you're going to start on your popsicle stick wick. Now, I just crack this popsicle stick in half, and I don't make sure the crack goes all the way up, and then I bend the two halves at the bottom in opposite directions, and then hot glue that in place. Now, I know that's kind of a little hard to visualize, but it's what makes the popsicle stick stand up. Now, you absolutely can go to the craft store or wherever and get pre-made wicks essentially and just glue that in place. Like, it doesn't really matter. You just need a wick that will be in place. So you can see here I use like a little skewer or another piece of wood, and I just kind of make sure the little feet are sticking down pretty solid on the bottom of that glass. And that's really the basis of what I'm doing here. I'm just putting a popsicle stick in the bottom of the jar and letting it stay. Anything beyond this step with the edible glitter spray is optional. This is, again, a self-love jar for me specifically, and I love glitter, so that's why I'm doing that. You don't have to do this step. You can do something else. You can put crystals at the bottom of the jar or do something before the wax is in, but this is the step to put something in the jar that the wax would stick to before putting anything on top of the jar, on top of the wax, if that makes sense. We are finally at the part where we melt the wax and actually make the candle. Yay! All of this hoopla has led to this point. Now, I have put some of my wax in my little silicone measuring cup pour spout thing, and I'm just putting it in a double boiler and letting that melt. And I'm adding more wax as things melt down just because there's a lot of airspace in the cubes and all the wax pieces. But as things melt down, I have more space to put more wax, and I just keep going. You occasionally stir it, and you just kind of let it sit until everything has become very liquidy and very smooth. There's no like extra clumps or anything, and you just want this to kind of become at the right like pouring consistency. You don't need to use the same little silicone measuring cup pour spout thingy that I'm using. You can use a separate bowl or something. You just need to make sure that you don't use the same thing for food purposes again in the future, just because you don't want any of like some of like the candle waxy bits to become part of your food, if that makes any sense. Now I've taken my silicone measuring pour cup spout thing, and I'm just going to move it over to the table where I'm working, and I'm going to take another popsicle stick and I'm just going to stir it. You want to make sure that your wax is a little bit cooler than when it was fully melted, or else the sides of the wax will cool before the insides and you can create like little caverns and stuff. So I'm just mixing with a popsicle stick the wax just until it becomes cool to the touch where I can kind of touch the sides of the silicone thing my wax is in and not burn my hands. Now that I've done stirring, you're going to do the easiest part ever and just pour the wax into the jar or container that you're using. Don't fill the wax all the way up to the very tippy top of the jar. You absolutely can do this, but probably not the safest bet. I kind of did this and then I regretted it later. Definitely, I would pour the wax maybe like a half an inch at the most beneath the top of the jar, and if you have any leftover wax, just set it aside, let it solidify, and then save it for a future project. I then take a clothespin and kind of maneuver the wick, the popsicle stick wick, into place so that it's not tilted over, and I let it solidify for a little bit. Once that's kind of like, I don't know, a little solid on the sides, you can kind of see that it's lighter on the edges than it is on the middle. I'm going to take some of my fun sprinkles and kind of sprinkle them along the top. These are fun like unicorn sprinkles, and I had a lot of fun with it, kind of with the sprinkle placement. And you can too. You can do sprinkles, you can do stones, you can do herbs. At this point, you just kind of have to play with the wax and how everything kind of sits on the wax as it's cooling, and how and when you would place those items on your candle. But then I'm done. I let the candle completely solidify just on the table there, and when I'm done, I place it on my altar to consecrate it and consecrate the candle for my specific purpose. And then I light it when I feel like I need a little boost of self-love. So thank you so much for watching my video. I know it was so freaking incredibly long. I really appreciate all of the love you guys have shown me and all the support you have given me. And I will see you for my next project. And you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you.